Hi, everybody. It is Mr. Whalen, and we're going to cover topic 1.3, aquatic biomes today. So our objective for the day is to describe the global distribution and principal environmental aspects of aquatic biomes. We're going to go over the different kinds of freshwater biomes, streams, rivers, ponds, and lakes. We'll also go over marine biomes like oceans, coral reefs, and then we'll talk about the different resources that comprise those marine biomes, salinity, turbidity, and different things like that. So, aquatic biomes in general, characteristics. You've got salinity, which is salt. How much salt is there in that body of water? And that determines which species are able to survive and live there, and whether or not it's safe for drinking for us. Then you've got depth. How deep is it? Depending on how deep it is, that's how much sunlight can penetrate that upper level and how many plants can actually use photosynthesis. Flow is the movement of the water. So if you think about a babbling brook or a stream where the water is moving, that's going to mix a lot of oxygen, and you get more dissolved oxygen in the water as you have that mixing, as opposed to a more of a stagnant body of water or a lake where the water is not moving quite so much. Temperature matters. Warmer water is going to hold less dissolved oxygen overall. Less dissolved oxygen means fewer aquatic organisms can live in that body of water. All right, freshwater. We've got rivers and lakes. Rivers have a high dissolved oxygen content, as I just mentioned, because of the flow. They've got a high flow, the water mixes with the air, and they're also going to carry a lot of nutrient-rich sediments. All right, deltas and floodplains, you've got the fertile soil, and all of that stuff is going to rush down and be deposited as the water is moving and churning. Lakes are more of a standing body of water, and they're a key source of drinking water. And you've got different zones within a body of water. At the very edge, you've got the littoral zone. That's very shallow water. If you think about the edge of Newton Creek, there's a lot of emergent plant life there. And you can see in the picture here these rooted plants where they're rooted down in the soil, which may be below water, but they're at the very edge. Then you've got the limnetic zone, which is where light can still penetrate. There's no rooted plants. You've got phytoplankton, but it's too deep to actually reach down into the soil. Below that is the profundal zone, which is too deep for any sunlight. So there's no photosynthesis that can happen there. And then the benthic zone is the actual murky bottom, and you're only going to get invertebrate life down there, bugs and things, and that is a very nutrient-rich layer of the biome. All right, wetlands are an extremely important biome, and an extremely important biome for New Jersey. We have a lot of wetlands in our state. And a wetland is an area with soil submerged and saturated in water for at least part of the year, but it's shallow enough for emergent plants. So our think like a mountain big picture idea here is that the plants that are living there need to be adapted to that specific area. For all of these biomes, the animals need to be, or the organisms need to be adapted to that specific area. So the plants in a wetland need to be adapted to living with the roots submerged in standing water. So think cattails, lily pads, reeds, things like that. So there's some benefits to wetlands. They store a lot of excess water during storms, lessening floods. They absorb a lot of rainfall into the soil, and that recharges the groundwater. The roots of those plants are really good filters for different kinds of pollutants. To bring it back to Newton Creek, all of those wetland plants do help filter the pollutants. There's been too many pollutants there, and in some cases that's not good for the plant life. But in the wetlands, those plants on the edge are very good at filtering. There's high plant growth due to lots of water and lots of nutrients. There's lots of dead organic matter in the sediments. You have falling trees, falling leaves, all of that decaying matter falls down into the bottom of that wetland or the edge of the wetland and provides a lot of rich nutrients to the bottom soil. Here are some different types of wetlands, and you might recognize some of these if you've been around New Jersey. So in the first picture A, this is a swamp, and this is a cypress tree. So this cypress tree is very well adapted to having its roots below water, all right? Other trees are not adapted to this type of a biome or this type of an ecosystem. Then you've got a marsh, and you've probably seen marshes. Certainly, if you go down to the shore, if you go fishing, as you're getting into the shore by the bay, there's a lot of marsh areas. You can see the lily pads and the brush along the edge there. So you've got reeds and cattails. And then the last one is a bog. If you get outside a lot, there are some bogs in New Jersey. My family and I went over to the Black Run Preserve, which is in Evesham Township near Marlton. There's some old cranberry bogs. The water there is more acidic. It's a little bit more contained, but it's very, very high in nutrients as well. Similar to marsh with the growing of the lily pads and plant life there. You've got spruce, you've got a lot of moss, sphagnum moss. Okay. Sorry, clicked too fast there. Is another super important biome and one that you can see a lot of in New Jersey as well. This is where the rivers dump into the ocean, where the rivers meet the ocean. And there's a mix there of fresh and salt water. And the species that are there have to adapt to that type of environment. Okay. When you get that mix of fresh and salt water, you're getting, very specific conditions that only certain species are going to survive in. It's very high in productivity, a lot of plant growth, because you get a lot of nutrients in the sediment as the river is flowing down and deposits all those nutrients. So a couple examples. You've got a salt marsh, which you could see in our state as you are going to the shore. That's an estuary habitat along the coast in temperate climates like ours. Breeding ground for lots of fish and shellfish. If you ever go out to the point at the end of Ocean City, you can see a lot of this going on. A lot of fishing goes on in that area. And there are these very cool little pools where you can see lots of different fish species and shellfish species. And right there, I mean, that I don't know exactly where that is, but if you were at the shore of the summer and looked out towards the bay, that's exactly what it looks like. Mangrove swamps are a really interesting biome themselves. They're along the coast of tropical climates, so it needs much more warmth. And they're characterized by these mangrove trees. And they have, here you can see them, these very long stilted roots. So the roots go down and you can see them above water holding the trees up. That provides a lot of structure to stabilize the shoreline, and it provides a really nice habitat for a lot of different species of fish and shellfish. All right, coral reefs. If you're interested in marine bio and you watch any nature documentaries, you probably have seen a lot about coral reefs. They exist only in warm, shallow waters beyond the shoreline. They are an extremely biodiverse area on Earth. And there's this mutualistic relationship, if you remember back to section 1, between the coral, which are animals, and the algae, which are plants. The coral take the carbon dioxide out of the ocean, create calcium carbonate, the exoskeleton, which actually forms the reef, and they also provide CO2 to the algae. When the algae then take that CO2, they live in the reef, provide sugar by photosynthesizing to the coral. Our big picture idea here is that both species rely on the other. This is a long-term symbiotic relationship. The coral can't live without the algae, without the energy that they provide, and the algae need the home of the reef and the CO2 from the coral. So they work together. So intertidal zones are this kind of narrow band of coastline between high and low tide. So they're subject to varying conditions daily. And you've got different organisms that are going to live at different areas of these different zones. The organisms, as I've said, need to be exceptionally well adapted to this specific area. So if you think about, again, if you've been to the shore, if you see any of the eddies that go out, the long rocks that go out into the ocean, if you've ever had a chance to walk out on one of them, you've probably seen a lot of barnacles and crabs, and they have these hard external shells because they're subject to a lot of crashing water, and they're also subject to a lot of direct sunlight. They're not underwater all the time, and at low tide, the sun is going to hit them a little bit harder, so they have those adaptations. So their shells, their tough outer skin can also prevent from drying out, which is called desiccation during low tides. And our big picture idea here, again, is that these different organisms are exceptionally adapted to live in different zones. So for example, in this picture, you've got the spiral rack, which is a type of seaweed, and it curls up and secretes this mucus to retain water during low tide. And then we have the open ocean. So the ocean covers a significant portion of the Earth. It's the largest area of Earth, and it has low productivity per area. So if you take it per square kilometer, it has very low productivity in terms of plant growth. It's just too deep for any plants to actually grow. It only grows algae and phytoplankton. However, it's so big that all in all, the oceans produce a lot of Earth's oxygen and absorb a lot of the Earth's atmospheric CO2. So we have zones to the ocean as well. The top zone is the photic zone. Photic meaning light, so that's where sunlight can reach and photosynthesis is going to occur. Then you have the aphotic, not light, aphotic, also called the abyssal. The abyss you've probably heard of, which is the area that is too deep for sunlight. Down here, you can see it's a little bit darker. And you in these aphotic zones, you have organisms that are exceptionally well adapted to living in those areas. Here you have an anglerfish, which has bioluminescence. The creatures in the aphotic zone have developed these adaptations to be able to survive in an area with little to no light. Okay, so our practice free response question for section 1.3 is going to focus on the suggested skill of concept explanation and explaining environmental concepts and processes. Your question is, identify an organism found in an aquatic biome and explain how that organism is uniquely adapted to live in that biome. Hope this video helped and that you were able to take some good notes. Good luck on the FRQ, and I'll see you in the next video.